The day my wife scattered my clothes across the driveway like trash was the day a convoy of black SUVs rolled onto our street and silenced every neighbor watching, and she still had no idea the man she called nothing owned everything. The sun was still high in the sky when the first suitcase hit the concrete and burst open like a wounded animal, spilling shirts and memories across the ground. Neighbors slowed their cars. Curtains shifted. Phones appeared behind windows. Because humiliation attracts attention faster than success ever does. She stood on the porch of the small suburban house with her arms folded and her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Every insult she hurled was designed to make me feel smaller than the cracked pavement beneath my boots. She told me I was a failure. She told me I was holding her back. She told me she was tired of pretending. She told me she deserved a man who could actually provide. The words were loud, but they were not new. Disrespect never begins loudly. It grows slowly in private before it explodes publicly. My shirts lay scattered across the driveway. My boots were tossed near the mailbox. A cardboard box of personal papers tipped over and spilled photographs across the grass. A picture from our wedding rested face down near the curb as if even the image could not bear to watch. She stepped forward and kicked one of the boxes further down the driveway. Her voice carried down the street as she reminded me that I had nothing. She told the neighbors I was broke. She laughed as if the performance was rehearsed. What she did not know was that I had been rehearsing something too. But my rehearsal was silent. I stood there calmly in a black t-shirt and worn jeans as if I truly had nowhere else to go. My silence irritated her more than anger ever could. She wanted tears. She wanted begging. She wanted collapse. Instead she got stillness. And stillness is unsettling when someone expects chaos. A few houses down a man pretended to water his lawn. Across the street a woman stood frozen on her porch pretending not to stare. My wife thrived on the audience. She thrived on the image of power. She thrived on believing she was finally above me. She stepped down from the porch and came closer. Her finger pointed toward the street. She told me to leave before she called the police. She told me I had embarrassed her for the last time. She told me she was done living like this. Living like what? Living with a man who drove an old truck. Living with a man who wore simple clothes. Living with a man who never bragged. Living with a man who refused to explain where he disappeared to during certain business trips. The truth was not that she was embarrassed of my poverty. The truth was she was embarrassed of my mystery. People fear what they cannot measure. And she could not measure me. I bent down slowly and picked up one of the scattered photographs. It was from our second anniversary. She was smiling in that picture. Not because of money. Not because of status. But because she believed we were building something. Somewhere along the way building stopped being enough. She wanted elevation. She wanted applause. She wanted visible wealth. She wanted a lifestyle that screamed success instead of whispered it. A cardboard box tipped over again as she kicked it with frustration. The sound echoed through the quiet street. Then she delivered the final insult. She told me I would always be nothing. That was the moment the universe decided to answer her. At the far end of the street a low hum began to rise. Not loud. Not aggressive. But organized. Engines. Multiple engines. The neighbors turned their heads first. Then she turned her head. Then I turned mine. 10 black SUVs turned onto the street in perfect alignment. The sunlight reflected off polished hoods. The convoy moved slowly with intention. Not rushing. Not hesitating. The kind of movement that signals authority without saying a word. My wife frowned at first. Confused. Then irritated. Because the spotlight she was enjoying was shifting. The SUVs lined the curb in front of the house one by one. Doors remained closed. Engines idled. The street fell completely silent. The man watering his lawn stopped. The woman across the street stepped down from her porch. Even my wife's voice disappeared. The first SUV door opened. A tall man in a tailored black suit stepped out. Gloves. Polished shoes. Calm posture. He scanned the driveway. His eyes found me immediately. He walked forward without hesitation. Past the scattered clothes. Past the tipped boxes. Past my wife. He stopped directly in front of me and lowered his head respectfully. "Sir." The word hung in the air like thunder without lightning. My wife blinked. Her expression shifted from irritation to confusion. The suited man gestured gently toward the convoy. "Your schedule requires immediate departure." The neighbors were no longer pretending. They were fully watching. My wife's lips parted but no sound came out. Another SUV door opened. Then another. Men and women in tailored suits stepped out calmly. One began picking up my clothes from the driveway carefully as if handling something valuable. Another lifted the scattered boxes with precision. Another gathered the photographs from the grass. They moved like a trained unit. Efficient. Professional. Silent. My wife stepped backward. Her earlier confidence evaporating. She looked at me like she was trying to recalculate everything she thought she knew. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked what was going on. I did not answer immediately. I simply looked at her. Not with anger. Not with pride. Just with clarity. Because clarity is heavier than rage. The suited man extended his hand slightly toward the lead SUV. The rear passenger door was opened. Inside was leather stitched with detail. Ambient lighting. Privacy glass. A world she had only seen in movies. The neighbors began whispering. Phones lifted higher. One of the security officers placed my final suitcase gently inside the SUV. My wife's breathing became shallow. She stepped closer to me now. Not to insult. To understand. Her voice was softer. Almost cautious. She asked who they were. She asked what this was. She asked why they were calling me sir. The only response I gave was a simple statement. I told her she should not have thrown away what she never understood. Her face went pale. The realization had not fully landed yet. But it was approaching. The suited man leaned slightly toward me again. The board is waiting. He said it calmly. As if this scene in the driveway was a minor delay. My wife's eyes widened. Bored. Waiting. Those two words shattered the illusion she had built. Her gaze darted from me to the convoy. From the convoy to the neighbors. From the neighbors back to me. She began apologizing suddenly. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But urgently. She tried to laugh nervously as if this was all a misunderstanding. She said she was joking. She said she did not mean it. She said she was just upset. But her voice did not carry conviction anymore. It carried fear. One of the suited women approached and handed me a tablet. On the screen was a live conference room filled with executives seated around a massive table. All waiting. All watching. The logo behind them displayed the name of a corporation valued in the tens of billions. Her eyes followed the glow of the screen. Recognition flickered. Confusion deepened. Because she had heard of that company. Everyone had. She just never imagined it had anything to do with the man she had just thrown into the street. The suited man spoke again. The shareholders require confirmation of your arrival. My wife's mouth opened but no words came. Her body felt frozen in place. Her earlier insults echoed in her own head now. Failure. Nothing. Poor. Embarrassment. Each word sounded smaller now. I stepped toward the SUV. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just deliberate. The neighbors parted slightly as if the driveway had become sacred ground. My wife reached for my arm. Her hand barely touching my sleeve. Her voice broke completely. She whispered that she did not know. That she was sorry. That she was angry. That she did not mean those things. I looked at her gently. Because cruelty is easy. Control is harder. I told her the problem was not that she did not know. The problem was how she treated me when she thought I had nothing. Her knees seemed weak. Her shoulders dropped. The weight of reality pressing down on her. The door of the SUV remained open. Waiting. The convoy idling like patient power. And as I prepared to step inside, the entire street understood something she had just learned. The quiet man with worn jeans. The man she called nothing. The man whose clothes were scattered like trash. Was never poor. He was just patient. And this was only the beginning. The moment I lowered myself into the back seat of the lead SUV, the air inside felt completely different from the air in that driveway. Outside was noise and shock and cracked pride. Inside was calm and controlled power. The leather seat adjusted automatically as the door closed softly and sealed off the street like it no longer existed. Through the tinted window I could still see her standing there on the edge of the driveway. Barefoot. Stunned. Breathing unevenly. Her eyes followed every movement of the security team as they finished gathering what she had thrown away minutes earlier. My wedding photo was carefully placed inside a protective sleeve. The box of personal files she had kicked was carried like something valuable. Even the boots she tossed near the mailbox were dusted off before being placed in the rear vehicle. Respect is not expensive. But it is rare. The suited driver in front adjusted his mirror slightly. He did not ask where to go. He already knew. The convoy began moving in unison. 10 black SUVs gliding away from the curb like a silent statement. The neighbors stepped back as we passed. Phones lowered slowly. Because whatever story they thought they were about to witness had just rewritten itself. In the side mirror I saw her shrink in the distance. Still standing. Still frozen. Still trying to process how quickly humiliation had reversed direction. The tablet in my hand buzzed softly. The boardroom screen was still active. 20 faces waiting. Executives from different cities. Different states. Different countries. All watching the driveway scene from their perspective. They had seen everything. Not because I planned to embarrass her. But because my life does not pause for personal drama. One of the senior board members leaned forward. A woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for dismantling billion-dollar mistakes. She did not ask if I was all right. She asked if I was ready. That is how leadership works. Emotion is acknowledged silently. Responsibility continues. I nodded once. The driver increased speed slightly. The convoy turned onto the main road. The boardroom lights reflected across the tablet screen. The woman spoke calmly. The acquisition vote is scheduled in 12 minutes. Her voice was steady. Unbothered. Focused. Because what happened in that driveway was personal. But what waited ahead was global. My wife believed she was throwing out a poor man. She had no idea she was pushing away the controlling shareholder of a multinational technology conglomerate valued at over $40 billion. She had no idea that I owned controlling stakes in infrastructure companies. Energy grids. Defense contracts. Real estate across 3 continents. She saw worn boots. She saw simple clothes. She saw an old truck. She mistook restraint for limitation. That mistake was hers to carry. The convoy exited the highway and merged into downtown traffic seamlessly. People moved aside without understanding why. Authority often does not need explanation. The tablet displayed charts and proposals. Numbers in the billions. Votes waiting. Markets reacting. This was my real environment. Not the porch. Not the driveway. Not the shouting. I listened carefully as each board member summarized their position. There was tension in the room. The acquisition was aggressive. Bold. Risky. But calculated. And the final vote required my approval. The SUV pulled into a private underground entrance beneath a glass tower that pierced the skyline. Security gates opened automatically. The convoy slid inside. Doors closed behind us. Above ground the city buzzed with normal life. Below ground the engine of an empire prepared to shift. The door beside me opened. The suited man who greeted me in the driveway stood waiting. His posture respectful. Not exaggerated. Just disciplined. The underground garage was quiet. Polished concrete floors. Black vehicles aligned perfectly. Security stationed discreetly. This was not flashy wealth. This was structured wealth. As I stepped out, the echo of my boots on the garage floor felt grounded. Real. Intentional. The elevator doors opened before we reached them. Access granted automatically. Inside the elevator mirrored walls reflected a man most people never truly saw. Not because I hid. But because they never looked beyond appearances. The boardroom waited on the 50th floor. When the doors opened, 20 executives rose from their seats simultaneously. Not dramatic. Not ceremonial. Just respect. The woman with sharp eyes gave a small nod. We are ready. I walked to the head of the table. Screens projected global markets. Currency fluctuations. Strategic outlines. This was the world my wife never asked about. Because she assumed there was nothing to ask. The vote began. One by one voices confirmed approval. Until only my vote remained. Silence settled across the table. Millions depended on this decision. Thousands of employees. Entire regions. Supply chains. Innovation pipelines. I gave my answer calmly. Approved. The room exhaled. Not loudly. But collectively. Because with that one word the acquisition moved forward. Billions shifted. Markets adjusted. Competitors recalculated. And the world continued without ever knowing about the driveway scene that morning. The meeting transitioned smoothly into logistics. Deadlines. Integration. Public announcement timing. As discussions continued my phone vibrated quietly on the table. A message from her. Then another. Then another. Apologies. Questions. Panic. Regret. The tone had shifted completely. No insults. No superiority. Only desperation. I did not open them. Not because I wanted revenge. But because clarity requires space. When the meeting concluded, several executives lingered briefly. Offering updates. Asking for confirmation. Respectfully addressing me as chairman. The title felt ordinary to me. Because I built it. To her it would have felt like a crown. Perspective changes everything. The suited man who collected my belongings earlier approached quietly. Everything has been transferred to the penthouse. He paused slightly. Your residence is secured. He did not mention her. He did not need to. Because my life had already moved past that driveway. Outside the tower press vehicles had gathered. Word of the acquisition leaked quickly. Financial networks were preparing to announce the news. Analysts were speculating. Stock prices were already climbing. No one in that driveway understood that the convoy they saw was connected to headlines forming across the country. Back in the quiet suburban neighborhood she was likely replaying every word she had thrown at me. Every insult. Every laugh. Every public humiliation. The difference between us was not money. It was vision. She saw a moment. I saw decades. The elevator carried me upward again to the private residence floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city stretching endlessly. The penthouse was quiet. Minimalist. Intentional. My belongings were already placed neatly inside. Nothing broken. Nothing thrown. Everything respected. I walked toward the window and looked down at the skyline. Phones continued buzzing. News alerts. Board confirmations. Investment updates. Among them her messages continued appearing. Longer now. More frantic. She said she did not recognize the man she became. She said she let outside pressure influence her. She said she was embarrassed of herself. She said she loved me. Love revealed after power is exposed carries a different weight. It feels conditional. Like loyalty activated by status. The sun began lowering over the city. Casting long shadows across the glass buildings. Power does not shout. It moves quietly. The convoy was already repositioned downstairs. Because tomorrow would require travel. International meetings. Strategic alignments. The world did not pause for heartbreak. Later that evening another message arrived. Not from her. From her father. Short. Direct. He requested a meeting. Respectful tone. No insults. No pride. The same man who watched his daughter scatter my clothes across the driveway now wanted conversation. Because now he understood who I was. But understanding after disrespect does not reverse consequences. I placed the phone face down on the marble counter. Silence filled the room. Peaceful. Clear. The humiliation she tried to stage had turned into revelation. Not because I exposed her. But because she exposed herself. And this was only the beginning. Because the next part would not take place in that driveway. It would take place when she shows up here. Uninvited. Desperate. And realizes that wealth is not the most powerful thing I possess. Control is. Night fell slowly over the city and the glass walls of the penthouse reflected a version of me that very few people had ever truly seen. Not the quiet husband standing in a cracked driveway. Not the simple man driving an old truck. But the architect of an empire who understood patience better than pride. The city lights flickered on beneath me like a constellation laid across concrete and steel. Power feels different when you have built it quietly. It does not need applause. It does not need explanation. It does not need witnesses. My phone vibrated again on the marble counter. Her name flashed across the screen. Then it disappeared. Then appeared again. Calls. Messages. Voice notes. The desperation had grown heavier. Her words no longer sharp or proud. Now trembling. Now fractured. Now filled with the kind of regret that only shows up after the door closes. I let the phone rest. Because the moment you respond too quickly to panic you lose leverage. And I had no intention of losing leverage again. Hours passed. The city settled into its evening rhythm. Car lights flowing like rivers below. The hum of distant traffic blending into background noise. Then the private elevator chimed. Soft. Controlled. The security team's voice came through the intercom discreetly. She is here. Of course she was. Some people cannot sit alone with what they have done. I gave permission for her to come up. Not because I owed her conversation. But because clarity deserves closure. The elevator doors opened slowly. She stepped out cautiously. No heels. No performance. No dramatic posture. Just a woman who had realized too late what she had discarded. Her hair was tied back loosely. Her face bare. Her eyes swollen from crying. The red dress from earlier replaced with something simple. Almost modest. She looked smaller. Not physically. Emotionally. The distance between us stretched across the polished floor like a boundary line. She did not rush toward me. She did not throw herself into my arms. She simply stood there, looking around the penthouse, taking in the scale of it. The view. The design. The quiet wealth. And for the first time she was seeing the life I never advertised. Her voice broke the silence softly. She said she never imagined this. She said she thought I was struggling. She said she thought I was hiding failure. I remained by the window, looking at the skyline. I told her she never asked. The words were calm. Not sharp. Just factual. She swallowed, her fingers twisting together nervously. She began speaking again. This time slower. She admitted she started resenting me months ago. Not because I mistreated her, but because she felt insecure around her friends. Their husbands drove luxury cars, posted vacation photos, showed off watches and status. And I did none of that. She mistook humility for lack. She mistook privacy for weakness. She mistook discipline for poverty. Her breathing became uneven. She said when Marvin came into her professional circle he represented everything flashy and visible. Confidence. Bragging. Public spending. The image of success. And she allowed that image to cloud her judgment. She convinced herself I was less. She convinced herself she deserved more. The word more echoed in the room. More attention. More visibility. More applause. More status. She looked at me with trembling eyes. She said she was ashamed. Not because I was wealthy, but because she realized she would have treated me better if she had known. And that realization broke her. Because it exposed her own shallowness. I turned toward her finally. The silence between us heavy but controlled. I told her something she needed to hear. If your respect depends on my bank account, then it was never respect. Her shoulders shook as she cried. She stepped closer now. Not boldly. Carefully. Like approaching something fragile. She said she let ego and outside pressure poison her marriage. She said she laughed in that driveway because she wanted to feel powerful. She said humiliating me felt like reclaiming control. Then she looked down. And admitted she felt empty even while doing it. The truth is, cruelty often comes from insecurity. And insecurity hides behind arrogance. She asked why I never told her. Why I never revealed who I truly was. The answer came without effort. Because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I own. The words lingered between us. Her tears flowed harder. She whispered that she did love me. That she still does. But the confession arrived too late. Love without loyalty is decoration. It looks beautiful until pressure tests it. She reached out as if to touch my arm. Then stopped herself. Because now she understood something else. Power is not loud. It is stable. And stability does not beg. She asked if there was any path back. Any way to rebuild. Any chance. Her voice held hope but also fear. I walked toward the dining table slowly and poured 2 glasses of water. I handed one to her. She accepted it with shaking hands. I told her rebuilding requires foundation. And our foundation cracked the moment she chose public humiliation over private conversation. Her lips trembled. She nodded. Because she knew that was true. Outside the glass walls the city continued shining. Unbothered. Unaffected. Markets were adjusting. News networks were preparing announcements about the acquisition. Tomorrow headlines would mention my company's expansion. They would mention strategic growth. They would mention billions. None of them would mention the driveway. None of them would mention her. That is the difference between personal drama and institutional power. She asked about the divorce. Her voice barely above a whisper. I told her the paperwork was already prepared. The legal process would move smoothly. No scandals. No public humiliation. No destruction. She looked confused. She asked why I was not angrier. Why I was not trying to hurt her. I answered calmly. Because I refuse to let your behavior reshape my character. That answer seemed to wound her more than shouting ever could. She stepped backward slowly. Realizing that the man she tried to embarrass was far stronger than she ever understood. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced at it. Marvin. Again. She did not answer. Instead she powered it off completely. That small act carried weight. Because it signaled awareness. But awareness does not erase consequences. She took a long breath. And asked one final question. If I had not thrown your things into the driveway today, would you ever have told me? The question hung heavy. I considered it honestly. Then answered. Yes. When I felt respected enough to share it. Her eyes closed briefly. The regret deepened. Because she realized she destroyed her own chance. She placed the untouched glass of water on the table. She straightened her posture slightly. A fragile dignity returning. She apologized again. This time without desperation. Without bargaining. Just acknowledgement. She turned toward the elevator. Walked slowly. Stopped once. Looked back. Not expecting rescue. Just memorizing. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. And the doors closed gently. Leaving the penthouse quiet again. I stood there for a moment absorbing the stillness. Not triumphant. Not devastated. Just aware. Aware that some lessons cost relationships. Aware that wealth reveals people more than it changes them. Aware that power means nothing without integrity. My phone vibrated once more. A message from Naomi. The press conference is scheduled for morning. Investors confirmed. Global response positive. The world was moving forward. And so was I. Because the convoy that arrived in that driveway was not just transportation. It was transition. And the next chapter would not involve proving anything to her. It would involve building something even greater. Morning arrived without drama. No shouting. No scattered clothes. No neighbors pretending not to stare. Just sunlight cutting through the glass walls of the penthouse and illuminating a city that had no idea how close it came to witnessing the collapse of something personal. The news broke at 9 sharp. Financial networks ran the headline across every major screen. Acquisition completed. Chairman Donovan Hayes finalizes multi-billion-dollar expansion. The numbers rolled beneath the headline in bold, clean lettering. Analysts debated strategy. Commentators praised the calculated timing. Stock prices climbed. Interviews replayed clips from the press conference where I stood composed beside executives who understood discipline. No one mentioned the driveway. No one mentioned insults. No one mentioned humiliation. Because the world only records outcomes. Not emotions. Back in that suburban neighborhood, however. The story was spreading differently. Neighbors replayed videos from their phones. The convoy. The suited security team. The tablet screen glowing in my hand. The moment the door of the SUV closed. Someone had already connected the dots. Someone had searched my name. Someone had discovered the press conference. Someone had realized the quiet man they watched get thrown out owned a corporation worth tens of billions. And like wildfire through dry grass. The realization spread. Her father saw it first. He sat at his kitchen table staring at the television screen. The same mouth that laughed in that driveway now hung open in disbelief. Her mother stood frozen beside him. Hand covering her lips. Her brother scrolled through his phone watching video clips posted online. Neighbors tagging each other. Captions reading. That was him. That was the man from yesterday. Her sister stared silently at the screen replaying my speech from the conference. Listening to the calm authority in my voice. The same voice they dismissed. The same voice they mocked. The difference between what they saw in that driveway and what the world now saw on television was devastating. Because power had context now. It had proof. And pride had nowhere to hide. She was sitting in her childhood bedroom when the news alert hit her phone. Her hands trembled as she opened the live stream replay. There I was. Standing at a podium. Speaking about growth. About global impact. About long-term vision. Reporters asking strategic questions. Executives nodding with respect. The same man she called nothing. The same man she told to leave. The comments section scrolled rapidly beneath the video. Visionary leader. Strategic genius. Respected chairman. Her chest tightened. Because she realized something deeper than embarrassment. She realized she never truly knew me. The humiliation she planned was rooted in assumption. An assumption is dangerous when it replaces communication. Her phone rang. Her mother. Then her father. Then her brother. The calls were frantic. They asked why she did not know. They asked how she missed it. They asked what she had done. Blame began shifting. Regret multiplied. Her father's voice cracked as he admitted he underestimated me. Her mother cried as she remembered laughing. Her brother grew quiet. The confidence gone. Because now the neighborhood saw them differently. The house that once felt secure now felt exposed. Neighbors no longer avoided eye contact. They stared openly. The narrative had reversed. They were no longer witnesses to a man's failure. They were witnesses to their own. Meanwhile I stood on a balcony overlooking the city after the press conference ended. The board satisfied. The market steady. The empire expanding. Naomi approached quietly. Media interest increasing. Interviews requested. Public image rising. Her voice remained professional. Efficient. Because success requires forward focus. She hesitated slightly before continuing. Your former in-laws have requested a meeting. Former. The word landed calmly. I nodded. Not because I intended reconciliation. But because closure prevents lingering noise. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Neutral location. Private conference room. When they arrived they looked different. Less loud. Less certain. Her father's shoulders were lower. Her mother's eyes red from crying. Her brother avoided eye contact. They sat across from me at a long table. No shouting. No superiority. Just discomfort. Her father spoke first. Voice softer than I had ever heard it. He admitted he misjudged me. He admitted he allowed pride to guide his reaction. He admitted he laughed. He apologized. Not strategically. But awkwardly. Her mother apologized next. Tears flowing. She said she raised her daughter to value respect. And somewhere that lesson was lost. Her brother cleared his throat. Struggled for words. Then offered a quiet apology too. The room felt heavy but not hostile. I listened. Because apology deserves acknowledgement. But acknowledgement does not require restoration. I told them something simple. The issue was not the driveway. The issue was the mindset behind it. If they believed wealth determined worth, then their respect was unstable. Her father nodded slowly. He understood. They asked if there was any chance the marriage could survive. I answered honestly. Trust once broken publicly rarely rebuilds privately. They accepted the truth reluctantly. The meeting ended without drama. Without raised voices. Without threats. Because when people face reality fully, noise becomes unnecessary. That evening she returned to the penthouse one final time. Not to beg. Not to negotiate. Just to retrieve the last of her belongings. She walked through the space quietly. Touching nothing unnecessarily. Observing everything. She paused at the balcony. Looked at the city. Then looked at me. Her voice was calm. Resigned. She admitted she confused visibility with value. She admitted she let comparison poison gratitude. She admitted she hurt herself more than anyone. There was no dramatic embrace. No theatrical goodbye. Just two adults acknowledging a fracture that could not be reversed. The elevator doors closed gently behind her. And with that the chapter ended. The neighborhood would never forget the convoy. Her family would never forget the television screen. And she would never forget the moment she realized that the quiet man she dismissed was never trying to prove anything. He was simply waiting to see who truly saw him. And the end will not be about revenge. It will be about the legacy that grows when discipline replaces ego. The house on that quiet suburban street did not look the same after that week. The paint was the same. The porch was the same. The driveway was the same. But perception had shifted. And perception changes everything. Neighbors who once pretended not to stare now watched openly. Not out of cruelty. But out of fascination. Because people remember spectacle. And that convoy of 10 black SUVs had become local legend. Children riding bicycles slowed down when they passed the driveway. Adults walking dogs lowered their voices when they crossed the street. Phones had circulated the video beyond the neighborhood. Clips of the suited security team picking up scattered clothes with respect. Clips of the rear passenger door opening. Clips of the quiet man stepping inside without anger. Some called it poetic. Some called it karma. Some called it a lesson. But everyone called it unforgettable. Inside the house, however, silence was heavier than public whispers. She had moved back into her childhood bedroom temporarily. Boxes stacked near the walls. Clothes folded without enthusiasm. The bed smaller than the one she left behind. Her mother avoided certain conversations. Her father avoided the television. Her brother avoided social media. The family that once laughed in a driveway now understood how fragile pride can be. Every morning the news mentioned my company. Expansion. Innovation. Global partnerships. My face appeared on business channels regularly. Not flashy. Not arrogant. Just steady. Investors praised discipline. Employees praised leadership. The world described me as visionary. She described me in her thoughts as patient. Patience is a power most people underestimate. Because it does not sparkle. It endures. A week after the incident the divorce became official. Clean. Efficient. Private. No court spectacle. No public scandal. The settlement transferred quietly. The condo placed under her name. The allowance structured responsibly. Enough to rebuild. Not enough to flaunt. When she received confirmation she did not feel relief. She felt finality. Because money was never the real loss. Respect was. Meanwhile the company moved forward aggressively. The acquisition integrated seamlessly. New jobs created. New infrastructure launched. The board praised the transition. And internally the story of the driveway circulated as quiet mythology. Not as gossip. As reminder. A reminder that humility is not weakness. And that leadership begins in how you treat those who appear ordinary. I visited the suburban neighborhood once more before fully relocating international operations. Not to confront. Not to flaunt. Just to close a personal loop. I drove a simple vehicle again. Not a convoy. Not 10 SUVs. Just one. When I stepped onto the driveway the cracks in the concrete looked unchanged. But the energy felt different. She was outside watering plants when she saw me. She froze. The hose continued running. Water spilling onto the ground unnoticed. Her eyes widened. Not in fear. In reflection. She walked toward me slowly. No anger. No arrogance. Just quiet acceptance. We stood a few feet apart. No dramatic embrace. No raised voices. She spoke first. She said she had spent days replaying that moment. The suitcase hitting concrete. The insults. The laughter. She said she did not recognize herself in that memory. Growth often begins with discomfort. I told her growth requires ownership. She nodded. Because she had finally learned that lesson. She asked how I remained calm that day. How I did not retaliate. How I did not humiliate her publicly. The answer came easily. Power that needs to shout is insecure. Real power moves quietly. She looked at the house behind her. Then back at me. She admitted that when she compared our life to others she forgot the foundation we were building. She admitted she chased appearances. She admitted she confused excitement with stability. Her honesty no longer carried desperation. It carried understanding. That difference mattered. The neighbors watched from a distance again. But this time their curiosity was softer. Because the spectacle had passed. What remained was maturity. I told her something that surprised her. The convoy was never about proving wealth. It was about timing. The board meeting that morning required my presence. The vehicles were scheduled long before the argument began. Fate simply chose dramatic timing. She blinked. Because she had imagined the convoy was retaliation. She realized now that her humiliation was self-inflicted. Not orchestrated. Sometimes life does not need revenge. It needs exposure. She asked if I ever hated her. I answered honestly. No. Hate requires attachment. And attachment had already dissolved. Her eyes watered slightly. Not from heartbreak. From clarity. She thanked me for not destroying her publicly. She thanked me for the structured exit. She thanked me for showing restraint. Then she said something that carried more weight than any apology. She said she would never measure a person by appearance again. That statement mattered. Because the lesson had finally rooted. I glanced around the neighborhood one last time. The same mailboxes. The same trees. The same sidewalks. But my perspective had shifted permanently. I extended my hand gently. Not romantically. Not ceremonially. Just respectfully. She took it. A handshake. Closure without bitterness. As I walked back to the vehicle she remained standing in the driveway. Watching. Not begging. Not hoping. Just acknowledging the moment. The engine started quietly. No convoy. No spectacle. Just forward movement. In the months that followed the company expanded further. International offices opened. Philanthropic projects launched in underfunded communities. Scholarships funded. Infrastructure repaired. Wealth used strategically. Not displayed recklessly. Her life shifted too. She pursued independent work. Focused on rebuilding identity without attachment to status. The neighborhood gradually moved on. But the story lingered as folklore. The day the quiet man was thrown out. And the convoy came. The real twist however was never the SUVs. Never the billions. Never the boardroom. The real twist was this. Character is revealed in private before it is confirmed in public. And the difference between humiliation and transformation is whether a person learns. She learned. Her family learned. The neighborhood learned. And I learned something too. Never shrink yourself to test loyalty. Because the right people respect you without needing proof. The convoy was dramatic. The press conference was powerful. The settlement was clean. But the greatest victory was internal. Walking away without hatred. Building without arrogance. Leading without noise. Because the man she called nothing was never trying to be seen. He was building something too large to be shaken by insult. And that is how power truly works. Quiet. Steady. Unshaken. 3 years passed faster than anyone in that neighborhood expected. Time has a way of smoothing over spectacle while quietly magnifying consequences. The driveway where my clothes once lay scattered eventually received new concrete. The cracks were filled. The surface refinished. But no amount of renovation erased the memory embedded in that pavement. People still referenced that morning in passing conversation. Not mockingly. Almost reverently. Because it became a symbol. A reminder that assumptions are expensive. My life had shifted continents by then. Global headquarters expanded into Europe and Asia. Renewable energy divisions scaled rapidly. Technology investments matured. Markets stabilized around strategic patience rather than aggressive noise. The company's valuation had grown far beyond what analysts predicted. Not because of risky leaps. Because of disciplined consistency. And through it all my name remained steady in business circles. Respected. Measured. Unemotional. That reputation was intentional. Because wealth fades. Reputation compounds. One autumn afternoon I returned to the city for a philanthropic summit. Our foundation had committed billions toward educational equity and small business development in underserved communities. The venue was massive. Glass and steel architecture filled with leaders from multiple industries. Policy makers. Entrepreneurs. Media. Panels discussing generational wealth and responsibility. Ironically, one of the keynote discussions centered on a topic that felt deeply personal. The psychology of status and identity. How perceived value influences human behavior. How comparison erodes contentment. How humility builds resilience. I delivered my address calmly. No mention of driveways. No mention of humiliation. Just principles. Treat people with dignity regardless of their position. Build wealth quietly. Never measure worth by display. The applause was genuine. Not because of charisma. Because of alignment. After the session concluded, as guests mingled beneath chandeliers, I noticed a familiar figure standing near one of the information displays. She looked different. Not broken. Not glamorous. Balanced. Her posture carried confidence without arrogance. Her expression carried maturity without desperation. She waited until the crowd thinned slightly before approaching. There was no tension in her stride. Only calm. When she stopped a few feet away there was a softness in her eyes. Not romantic. Reflective. Time had reshaped both of us. She introduced herself formally. Not as my former wife. As the director of a community-based entrepreneurship program funded by one of our subsidiaries. The irony was subtle. Not theatrical. She had rebuilt. Not through dependence. Through discipline. She spoke about her work with young entrepreneurs from neighborhoods similar to where she grew up. Teaching financial literacy. Encouraging long-term thinking. Helping them avoid the trap of visible status chasing. There was strength in her voice. Experience. Growth. She admitted quietly that the moment in the driveway forced her to confront insecurities she never addressed before. Comparison. Ego. External validation. She said losing the marriage was painful. But it forced introspection. She thanked me again. Not for the settlement. Not for the penthouse. For restraint. For refusing to destroy her publicly when it would have been easy. She explained that the humiliation she planned that day could have followed her forever. Instead, the lesson followed her. That difference shaped her trajectory. We stood beneath the summit lights discussing strategy. Not memories. Because the past no longer defined the present. There was no longing. No unresolved emotion. Just mutual understanding. She had become someone who no longer measured people by appearance. And I had become someone who no longer felt the need to test loyalty through concealment. Growth often arrives through fracture. Later that evening during a private networking session, one of the panel moderators mentioned the viral driveway story from years ago. He did not know the woman standing across the room had been part of it. He simply referenced it as a cultural lesson. A reminder that humility and assumption do not coexist well. She heard it. I saw the flicker of recognition in her expression. But instead of shame, there was composure. Because she had integrated the lesson. Not buried it. When the summit concluded, she extended her hand once more. Firm. Confident. She wished me continued success. I wished her the same. No dramatic music. No cinematic goodbye. Just two adults who had transformed separately. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, the city skyline reflected against the dark river below. Black SUVs waited nearby. Not 10 this time. Only 2. Efficiency replaces spectacle when ego dissolves. I paused for a moment before entering the vehicle. Thinking about how quickly perception can distort reality. How easily pride can blind someone. How powerful patience can be. The driveway moment was never about wealth. It was about character under pressure. She once believed I was poor because I did not perform success. Now she understood that real security does not need display. The convoy that day did not make me powerful. Discipline did. Her insults did not diminish me. They revealed her. And the greatest transformation was not financial. It was psychological. She learned to detach identity from status. I learned to reveal truth earlier in relationships. The neighborhood legend became quieter over time. Replaced by new stories. New gossip. New spectacles. But for those who witnessed it directly, the lesson remained clear. Never discard someone based on surface perception. Never humiliate someone to feel elevated. And never confuse quiet confidence with weakness. As the SUV door closed softly behind me that night, the engine humming steadily, I felt something deeper than victory. Peace. Not the peace of winning. The peace of evolving. The man who stood in that driveway years ago had not changed fundamentally. He had simply been revealed. And the woman who once laughed on that porch had not been destroyed. She had been refined. In the end, there was no revenge. No dramatic collapse. No public ruin. Only growth. And growth is the most powerful ending any story can have. Because when pride dissolves, wisdom remains. And that is how this story truly ends. Not with humiliation. But with maturity. Not with wealth. But with understanding. Not with noise. But with steady, quiet strength.